review of the last 5 chapters. Last week we did the first 5 chapters of the book Everyone Communicates, Few Connects by John Maxwell. So we are going to go ahead and get started on chapter 6 and just hurriedly kind of review down to chapter 10. Chapter 6 says, connectors connect on common ground. It is difficult to find common ground with others when the only person you are focused on is yourself. So, barriers to finding common ground. Assumption. I already know what others know, feel, and want. Jerry Ballard says, all miscommunications are a result of differing assumptions. People are assuming too much and they make that assumption, and because of that, they just tend to think they already know something about you when they don't. And it's not good to make an assumption. Arrogance. I don't need to know what others know, feel, or want. Supreme Court Justice Louise D. observes that 9/10 of the serious controversies that arise in life result from misunderstanding. From one man not knowing the facts, which to another man seem important, or otherwise failing to appreciate his point of view. People tend to have an arrogance and not willing to understand what other people think sometimes, and tend to relay their own facts that could not even be the true facts, but they don't tend to listen to what the other person has to say because they feel like they're the one that knows. Indifference. I don't care to know what others know, feel, or want. Comedian George Carlin says, scientists announced today that they have found a cure for apathy. However, they claim no one has shown the slightest bit of interest in it. Indifference. And then control. The last step to finding a barrier for common ground. I don't want others to know what I know, feel, or think. These kind of people, they tend to take control of the situation instead of listening. They don't usually care for the other opinions because they want to be in control of what the opinions are. And you don't tend to care what other people know that you know because you're controlling the situation. But choices that would help you find common ground. Availability. I would choose to spend time with others. You're choosing to spend the time. You're making availability for yourself. Listening. I will listen my way to common ground. You're taking time to listen. You ask questions. I'll be interested enough in others that you will ask questions. Thoughtfulness. I will think of others and look for ways to help them. Openness. I will let people into my life. You're willing to be open to people. Likability. I will care about people. And humility, which I think is the biggest one. I will think of myself less so that I can think of others more. I think it's tough making yourself available sometimes and being able to listen and be thoughtful, because when people really don't seem to care about your opinion. But it takes a lot. I think it takes a lot more to humble yourself in front of someone than it is to just listen to someone's opinion. Because if you can humble yourself, you can respect what others have to say when it comes to the situation instead of trying to say that you are wrong. Humility is a capacity for self-criticism, allowing others to shine. So when you are having that humility, you're able to help other people's ideas that could be very good shine, instead of thinking that you know it all. That self-criticism is good because you're seeing and asking questions for yourself. All right, does that seem right or wrong? Right? You're thinking for yourself. You're not just saying, "Oh, I'm always." You're not trying to be arrogant or anything. You're showing a sense of humility and saying, "All right, maybe there's some faults that I have, and that it's good to have someone else maybe correct me if I need correction." To connect on common ground, you must always ask, "Do I feel what you feel?" Before asking, "Do you feel what I feel?" Do I see what you see before asking, do you see what I see? Do I know what you know before asking, do you know what I know? Do I know what you want before asking, do you know what I want? Those 4 questions will help you to connect on common ground much easier, because when you're able to say, hey, do you feel what I feel about it? And if they're able to answer back and resonate with you, then you can start that common ground conversation. But if you're saying, well, do you feel what I feel instead? They'd be like, well, I don't know if I feel the same way, and then it creates a small conflict in the conversation instead of starting a conversation. It's the same way for saying the way when you see things that they want to see, or when you're trying to say, do you see what I see in a sense, or when you're saying, do you know what I know, and going back and forth, you're putting yourself ahead of them when you're saying, oh, well, do you know how I know things? Do you know that? Do you know the way I want things? Do you know this? Do you know that? You're putting yourself in front of them first. You're making yourself seem better sometimes. So you have to make sure that before, when you're trying to create that common ground, you want to see how they feel about things first, so that you can find something to connect with them on that common ground before you decide to say, well, do you see how I see it? Going into chapter 7, connectors do the difficult work of keeping it simple. I think simplicity is so good, but it's so undervalued. People think too complicated about things, when sometimes I had a friend I was talking to yesterday who actually recently started trying to finally, like, he bought a Bible and he's trying to understand Christianity because his heart's been changed, and he kind of realized that maybe Jesus is really real for him. And I told him, he's asking me, well, how would you start? How would you do this? How do you do that? I'm like, it's way more simple than you think. It's like, it's so much more simple than you think, because he's making it sound so complicated how to get started on reading the Bible. And I was like, look, if your focus is on wanting to know Jesus more, then you start where Jesus started. I told him, you start where Jesus' life started. Figure out, read his story, and read what Jesus did. And when you get to learn how Jesus lived for us and what he did for us, that's a good start, especially if you want to learn more about Jesus. You know what I mean? And he was like, is that simple? I'm like, it's that simple, man. You just read. And if you have questions, you ask questions. Like, my mom said, what was it?
If you don't ask questions, you won't get answers.
Yeah, if you don't ask questions, you're not going to get answers. And it's just as simple as that. If you're not going to ask the question, of course you're not going to get an answer back, right? To be simple is to be great, Ralph Waldo Emerson says. John's criteria for good material when it comes to being simple, he says humor, something that will make people laugh, heart, something that will captivate people's emotions, hope, something that will inspire people and help, something that will help people in some tangible way. You're trying to reach for them. You're trying to reach for them, who they are. So if you can find a way to make them laugh a little bit, make them feel it in their emotion, make them have hope to inspire, you're able to help those people find something tangible to grab onto. He says that for speaking in so many countries too, he says he developed a 3S strategy. He says keep it simple, say it slowly, and have a smile. And these are the coolest. I thought these 3 S's were so simplified that it's oversimplified. People will overthink it, but you shouldn't have to overthink that. It's just keep it simple. Say things slowly so you can take that time to really reach them, and just smile. You know, just a smile can make a big difference in someone who's having a bad day, or just not going through something. Because when you're speaking in front of a lot of people, if someone comes in and they're having a horrible day, but you are just trying to reach out to them and you just have a big smile, that energy will rub off on people. And it's just as simple as that. The art of simplicity. Talk to people, not above them. You might be above somebody. You might be sometimes better than somebody, but it does not mean you should be talking like you're better. You shouldn't be talking down to them. You talk to who they are. You talk to their heart. you get to the point. You don't want to overcomplicate things. Like I said, if you overcomplicate a situation or connection with someone, it makes it harder for them to sit down and want to listen to you for a long time. You must get to the point you are trying to make so that they understand, all right, this is what he's trying to relay. I get it. I understand. Got it. Let's go. And they keep wanting to listen. You know what I mean? Because you got to the point. He said recommendation is always have high opinion, always have, or was all, the story was they were always high in their opinion. While they worked, they were given numerous things, and a lot of stuff happened. I don't know, I can't, it was the, I might have to read this story, actually, shoot. I was trying to see if I could do this without fully reading the story, but it's like it's a long story, so one second, let me find this story for everyone. All right. I gotta make sure I find it. The art of simplicity. In the book, the lexicon, and it says by Robert Thornton, Lexicon of Intentionally Ambiguous Recommendations. He's talking about basically the people that he was referring to were always high in their opinion. While they worked with us, he was given numerous citations. They would say that his real talent is getting wasted at his current job. In the story, they said they were pleased to say that this candidate is a former colleague of theirs. You simply won't believe this woman's credentials. He would always ask if there was anything he could do. You will never catch him asleep on the job. And he doesn't know the meaning of the word quit. And these were things that were a recommendation for this person. They were recommending this person in the story who was trying to acquire the company. And basically the meaning behind these recommendations were the recommendations weren't necessarily true. They often were just seen smoking a joint, maybe, rested multiple times, got bombed. He gets bombed regularly. Can't tell you, I can't tell you how happy I am that he left our firm. They faked most of their resume. They were always wondering. Too crafty to get caught. Can't spell it either. Couldn't spell the word quit. They were basically showing what the recommendation was for certain things and what they were saying for them. Even though the meaning behind it was they actually weren't putting in the work. They actually weren't making it, they were making it different. They were different. They weren't necessarily actually staying, because if you saw when they recommended what he said, what he was trying to say recommendation-wise, was nicer than what the meaning came out to be, right? It was the perception of what was being said. The meaning was simple. The recommendation was a little bit oversimplified. But when you are trying to get to the point, you have to say it over and over and over and over and over again. The first time you say something, it's heard. The second time, it's recognized. And the third time, it's learned, is what William H. Rochester says. You say it over and over and over and over again. Say it clearly. You don't want yourself to be misunderstood. You don't want yourself to be misunderstood. Having an understanding so there won't be a misunderstanding. Charles Blair. He says, having an understanding so there won't be a misunderstanding. If you can make things come out clearly, things can come out easier. They're able to better understand what you're trying to get across when you can actually say something clearly. Jack Welch, the former CEO of General Electric, says, insecure managers create complexity. Frightened, nervous managers use thick, convoluted planning books and busy slides filled with everything they've known since childhood. So he's saying when you are insecure about stuff, these managers end up getting too complicated about things. But managers that can get nervous usually try to plan things out so that they can be able to figure things out. But it doesn't mean it's necessarily clear, but he is trying to figure it out. So you have to find a way to plan things sometimes to figure things out for where you're at. And then last, say less. You don't have to say so much. You don't have to say so much. Keep it simple, keep it small. Don't overemphasize what it is. So you get to the point, you talk to people above them, you must say things, repeat it over and over again. You have to make sure people understand it. You know, like William says, when the first time you say it, it's heard, but the second time it's recognized, and the third time people learn it. Because it's repeated. You must make it clear, say it clearly, and say less. Chapter 8, connectors create an experience that everyone enjoys. You take responsibility for your listeners. In general, there are no bad audiences, only bad speakers. So, lots of people out there, but nobody's listening. Some people have a cemetery communication. So in general, there are no bad audiences, but if you are not a good speaker, if you can't take responsibility for the people that are listening, you create that cemetery communication where a lot of people are there, but nobody's listening because you can't get them to listen. Communication in their world. You must remember what we think is important. They remember what they think is important. So you might think that what you think is important, but people don't remember what you think is important. They'll remember what they think is important. So if you can find a way to communicate in their world, you can figure out where they're at, and you can figure out a way to communicate to them in that spot. Capture people's attention from the start. Myrna Moravsky says, people have remote controls in their heads today. If you don't catch their interest, they just click off. You have to be able to capture people within that short amount of time span that some people seem to pay attention. Because a lot of people sometimes don't pay attention, but if you can capture them right away, they'll listen. Say it so it sticks. There are tons of sayings that stick. Everyone remembers them, right? Patrick Henry, give me liberty, give me death. That's a quote a lot of people remember. Nathan Hale says, I regret that I have but one life to give for my country. Abraham Lincoln says, the government of people, by the people, for the people. Everyone remembers that. Winston Churchill, when he says never, never, never give up. John F. Kennedy, when he says, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. One of the most well-known, Martin Luther King Jr., I have a dream. 4 simple words. One of the most well-known quotes in the world. Ronald Reagan, he says, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. These quotes were said in a time, and when they were said in that time, they stuck because they had deep meaning behind them. And deep meaning behind them. So when you are trying to create an environment, when you're trying to find an experience that everyone can enjoy, you must understand you got to take that responsibility. You have to communicate in their world, where they're at. You want to be finding where they find things that are important. And if you can relate to that importance so that you can capture them, so you can get them from the start when you're trying to do stuff, so you can make them understand, like, hey, I'm here to make a change. I'm here to make a difference. I'm here so that something sticks in your life when I'm speaking, so that I can capture you and have you listen to what I have to say, so I can change your life also. You must make sure you work to create the right experience for your communication. Wherever you are making the setting, wherever you're at, however you're trying to set your environment, you want to try to work to create the right experience for your environment. Number 9, connectors inspire people. John says, how much does it really matter if someone is highly motivated in their work and in their life? He says some of his research on how much motivation really matters was astounding to him. I had to cross-check his references carefully to make sure that the statistics could all be verified. Lots of studies that they read and tossed around numbers like 40% or even higher, then they compare the performance of motivated employees versus unmotivated employees. A 40% performance differential is staggering, he said. Read one study that said motivated employees are 87% less likely to leave an organization compared to unmotivated employee. 87% variant there. Employees that are motivated are 87% less likely to leave an organization compared to unmotivated employees. He said lots of studies that he read said that people who are motivated at work call in with dramatically fewer sick days, dramatically fewer insurance claims, less employee theft, fewer wasted hours. And the list went on, he says. The statistics just blew him away. There's a huge difference in the outcome, the deliverables, the achievements of motivated people versus unmotivated people. But he says, but you all kind of know this from personal experience. You know how much more you will give if someone inspires you, right? When someone at work is actually inspiring you, when they are, they're really leading you guys well, they seem to really care, it motivates you to be there. I know one of my jobs, there sometimes I liked calling in sick, sometimes every now and then, just because I didn't like the job that much, honestly. And that wasn't like necessarily wasn't like an awesome situation, you know what I mean? Like, it just wasn't a good job to me, and I didn't really like it that much. The environment wasn't really that great, you know? Because I can tell you for sure, the last job I had before the job I have right now, I don't think I ever called in sick. It was one time because I actually was sick. Like, I legitimately got so sick, I just had to call in. But I never called in sick, and I worked extra days. Actually, there were some days I worked a lot more than I should have worked that week. But because they needed people to fill in, I worked those days because I actually liked that job. So there is a difference, you know, when there is a place where the environment is more favorable, where you're employed, where you're working, where you seem to be more motivated at that work, you really do tend to not just want to leave sometimes or call in sick, or you even want to help fill in sometimes with certain stuff. Because everyone wants to be inspired. The inspiration equation, what people know, plus what people see, plus what people feel. That's what equals inspiration. You're figuring out what they know, you're figuring out what they're seeing, and you figure out what people feel so you can inspire. What people need to know, that you understand them and are focused on them. That you understand them and are focused on them. That you have high expectations of them. Steve Jobs says, management is about persuading people to do things they do not want to do, while leadership is about inspiring people to do things they never thought they could do. And I love that quote, because honestly right now I think I'm in a job situation where I don't understand it that much sometimes, because I'm not a huge car person, but I am outperforming myself, in my opinion. I'm doing way better than I should be doing, and that's literally only because they are so nice to me and are so encouraging to try and help me figure things out, and it's awesome. And I think that's so motivational for me, because then it makes me want to just try harder, and I actually get things done, even when I really don't think I should be. I can barely understand sometimes what's going on. So, but it's that drive, like I feel inspired to work harder, because I see that without me, sometimes they wouldn't be able to do or sell some of the cars they have because of where my job position is at. So I have to learn fast, but I am learning fast because God's helping me for one, but two, the people that are very, very inspiring and they're very encouraging, and I like it. It's a good environment, but they have high expectations for me though, so that's a good thing. But what people need to see that your conviction. People need to see your conviction. President Lyndon B. Johnson says, "What convinces is conviction. Believe in the argument you're advancing. If you don't, you're as good as dead. The other person will sense that something isn't there, and no chain of reasoning, no matter how logical or elegant or brilliant, will win your case for you." So if you can't convince your conviction, then you're clearly, like he says, if you believe in the argument you're advancing, if you don't, you're as good as dead, right? If you can't believe in the conviction that you have, you can't believe in what you're doing, you're not going to be able to achieve it. It's going to be hard. So people need to see that your conviction for what you're doing is there. People need to see your example. The mediocre teacher tells, right? They just tell you what to do. A good teacher explains. Someone who can actually sit there and explain what it is they're trying to relay, how they're wanting to speak it, what they want to say. You don't want to sit there and just tell people what they're supposed to do. And you want to be able to explain how they're supposed to do it. And a great teacher demonstrates. So not only are they explaining what to do, they demonstrate to you how you should be doing it. But people need to feel your confidence in yourself and in them. They need to feel your gratitude for them. Gladys Stern says, "Silent gratitude isn't much good to anyone." You can be thankful for someone, but if you don't show that you're thankful for someone, sometimes they'll tend to think, well, maybe you didn't care about what I did, right? There's sometimes you do something really nice for somebody, and then sometimes they just won't say anything at all and just go about their day, and it kind of makes you be like, well, all right, like, it's kind of, I don't know if I want to do something for you next time. You didn't really seem to care. Which may not be true. They might have cared a lot. They might have took it really nice and personal, They might have loved what you did for them. But because there was nothing that was said whatsoever, and they just walked off or did whatever they did without even mentioning the fact that you did something for them, it sometimes can be hard for people. Now, not that hard for me. I'm used to someone like giving gratitude and not necessarily saying, like someone necessarily always saying thank you back, because like it's not a big deal. Like I know they appreciate it without having to say thank you. That's just how I am. But there are people that feel that way. Sometimes they like having a thank you. You know what I mean? And it's not like a bad thing. But some people like it because they realize the person recognizes them, isn't just ignoring them. Some people want to be recognized. Sometimes you just gotta make people feel that gratitude for them. You want to make them feel that gratitude. And then I like this because there was a verse that he used. He says in 1 Samuel 2:9, God says, God protectively cares for his faithful friends step by step. God protectively cares for his faithful friends step by step. Amen. John says for the last 10 years, he's continually expressed to God his gratefulness for both of the people that were in the story. He says he will help, he will be there, show appreciation, because what people remember most is how you made them feel. If you can make someone feel appreciated, you can make someone feel confident, you can make people feel that they can see that you're confident, that you can inspire them, it inspires them. Chapter 10, connectors live what they communicate. Credibility is currency for leaders and communicators. With it, they are solvent. Without it, they are bankrupt. He says the first 6 months, communication overrides credibility. The first 6 months you are a leader of something, your communication will override your credibility, which is not something you should take for granted. You want to be able to communicate enough that credibility does not matter, because credibility does not matter because maybe you're not credible right now. But after those 6 months, you must have your credibility override your communication. Because once you have become credible with the people that you are trying to lead, the communication after that is important, but your credibility is more important because they see that, yes, he is credible and he is a true leader. I can listen to him if he talks to me. Because if you don't have the credibility after a good amount of time, people tend to not want to listen to what you have to say. He says, the credibility checklist, have I connected with myself? The relationships we have with others are largely determined by the relationships we have with ourselves. The relationships we have with others are largely determined by the relationships we have with ourselves. A lot of times, if you can't forgive yourself for something, it's going to be hard to forgive someone else, right? When you are hard on yourself about things that really you don't need to be hard on yourself for, or you tend to let yourself get depressed or sad about things sometimes that really you don't need to be depressed about or whatever, you tend to show that expression or emotion towards someone else. And your relationship with that person is based off stressfulness, depression, you know what I mean? Like emotions that have to do with just being depressed sometimes or relaying other emotions, right? Because that person, like, sometimes they won't talk to you unless they're going through something horrible. And you're like, oh, that's basically our friendship. When they have something going wrong or they have tea, right? Something to say about something, or it's not necessarily always the best, or they're going through a rough time, that's the only time they tend to have conversation with you, because you, for yourself, tend to only connect with your side that's depressed all the time, or down, or angry, whatever it might be. So you want to connect with yourself properly so that you can connect with others too. Have I made right my wrongs? There are going to be some wrongs in life that you make, but are you capable of making right those wrongs so that you can better further have credibility with the people you're trying to communicate with? Because if you can't tend to right a wrong sometimes for people that you have wronged, that really need a friend that can be there for them, who can truly encourage them sometimes, especially in God or with their own life, to further their life better, they won't tend to listen to you because they're like, well, you did me wrong that one time, and you never apologized for it, you never came to me and asked for forgiveness, you didn't care about me, you just kind of went about your business after you did that to me, and I thought that was horrible. And they tend to not want to listen to you because they have that one thing in mind that makes them remember sometimes, hey, you did me wrong that one time. And because of that one thing that really hurt me, I don't care to listen to you anymore. Am I accountable? When you make a commitment, you create hope. When you keep a commitment, you create trust. So when you are trying to lead an accountable lifestyle, you have to make the commitment so you can create that hope. But you also want to keep the commitment with those people that you make a commitment with, so that they can see that you are accountable for your actions, and that tends to build credibility. Do I lead like I live? Are you leading the lifestyle that you claim? Are you living the lifestyle that you are deciding to lead? If you can't live the lifestyle that you are proclaiming when you are a teacher, saying, hey, this is the kind of lifestyle you should try to live, or when you are in that position of leadership, or you're just a mentor to someone, if you can't live the lifestyle you're proclaiming, how are they going to live that lifestyle either? Jim Ron says, you cannot speak that which you do not know. You cannot share that which you do not feel. You cannot translate that which you do not have. And you cannot give that which you do not possess. To give it and to share it, and for it to be effective, you first need to have it. So like I said, you cannot live a life that you proclaim if you don't live the life you proclaim. You can't lead by example if the life you teach isn't the life you actually live. Do I tell the truth? Are you being honest with yourself? And are you being honest with other people? Am I vulnerable? Parker Palmer says, we all know that perfection is a mask. So we don't trust people behind know-it-all masks. They're not being honest with us. The people with whom we have deepest connection are those who acknowledge their weaknesses. When you are able to listen to a speaker on another level, where you can understand that emotional sense when they're speaking to you, It's because they show a vulnerability, right? When they're able to be vulnerable to their audience, just show, hey man, I've been through this, been through that. They discuss the things that, like sometimes they have some weaknesses they have. When they're able to discuss that, it's easier to connect with those people, because we all know someone who hides behind the know-it-all mask. They think they know everything. They don't tend to be open about certain conversations or certain situations. They don't like to talk about stuff because they think they know better than everyone else, because they don't want to be open to anybody. And it's hard to connect with those kind of people. And they need to ask themselves, are they vulnerable? If they're not vulnerable, maybe they need to work on it. That's why you have to ask yourself, are you vulnerable? Can you be vulnerable in front of people when you're trying to make change? Am I following the golden rule? Everyone knows the golden rule. Treat others the way you would want to be treated, right? Are you following that rule? Are you treating others the way you want to be treated? Or are you treating others a different way and expect to be treated right? If you're treating others a way that is not going to give in respect back, if you have no respect for someone, do not expect respect back from that same person. Now, if there are someone who is very kind and generous and really wants to try and build a connection with you, they'll tend to be like, all right, that's cool, whatever. They'll still be very nice to you. They'll still show you kindness, you know what I mean? But if you can't treat that person the same way, most people are not going to treat you with respect or kindness or love or any kind of way that is caring, because you don't show any toward them. So if you want someone to show that love, you want someone to build connection with you, you must treat them the way you would want to have that be treated also. So are you following the golden rule? Do I deliver results? Is what you're doing actually delivering results when you're trying to build this credibility with people? Peter Drucker says, communication always makes demands. It always demands that the recipient become somebody, do something, believe something. It always appeals to motivation. So in other words, communicators exhort people to deliver results. But to be credible as a communicator, you must also deliver results yourself. You must also deliver results yourself. The only way to keep communicating with people is to live what you communicate. You must live what you communicate. Right? So the big question, can I learn to connect with others? And the answer is yes. For example, the story of Moses, right? Moses was not good with people at first. Moses was also not a very good communicator at first either. And he was not a very good leader at first either. Moses had very many flaws. Yet, he's one of the most well-known people in the Bible for leading God's people out of Egypt. Even with him not being very good with the people, not being able to communicate to them sometimes, and sometimes he was not a very good leader. But he had a relationship with God. Lauren Wolfe says the Bible on leadership says that there's a wide-ranging debate about the innateness of learnability of effective communication skills and the nature of charisma. He weighs in that it can be learned. And he writes, God's suggestion to Moses was to team him with his brother Aaron, who was a better speaker. But it was Moses, not Aaron, who spoke to Pharaoh and led his people out of Egypt. What he lacked in speaking ability, Moses possessed in conviction, courage, and compassion for his people. These traits were communicated unmistakably to all who were exposed to him, both follower and foe. Moses took whatever ability he did possess, and he made the most of it. He did what he was called to do, and he increased his influence and used it to help an untold number of people, and he connected with them. And when he died, an entire nation wept. The people grieved his loss for 30 days. Now that's an impact. even with someone who was not very good with people, with someone who was not a very good communicator, with someone who really was not a good leader, what he lacked, he made up with, and how he literally had such hard conviction to do what God told him to do. He had such courage to help the people that God wanted to help. And he had compassion for God's people. And because of that, these people grieved him for so many days because he made such an impact on the Israelites in the story. He made such an impact on the entire nation. I think that's one of the coolest examples of a true leader right there. Even though he wasn't good at some things, he made such a difference in people's lives that they all wept his loss. Right? For you to make the biggest impact as a leader, you must find where your strengths are at the most. And if you lack in certain areas, find where you don't lack in those certain areas. Find the things you don't lack at and go hard on them. Focus on those things so you can figure out how to communicate with people better. Right? When you're able to find the things that your strengths are at, you take those strengths, really work on them, and eventually those strengths will overcome the weaknesses that you also have, because you'll learn to use what those weaknesses were eventually to make them strengths, so you can become a good speaker too, and become a better leader even if you're not a very good leader right off the bat. Because those traits that Moses possessed, conviction, courage, compassion, those are good traits of a leader. And he took those traits and was able to use it to actually become a good leader. So he was no longer a bad leader. He actually became an amazing leader because of those things.